Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So today's show, I wouldn't call it an interview. It's more of a conversation. And it's a conversation with someone whose voice I've heard for, probably the past 5 years or so in the halls of our homes. And it's Scott Kesterson. He is the center of Bards FM. If you're not familiar with Bards FM, I highly recommend you check him out. It's just www.bards.fm. And he is someone that has been doing a podcast relentlessly. I think he does like 16 shows a week. And he's one of the few people that I find is almost always like right in sync with my thinking and what I'm discovering. And what I like about his show is he does a lot of interviews, but he also just does a lot of his own narrative where he's just talking and walking through what he's focusing, what he's discovering. And he's very intellectually honest. He will admit when he's wrong. He will call people out that he disagrees with. He's a very, very straight shooter. Probably part of his military background is you have to be a straight shooter in the military if you're going to survive. And so in today's show, we're going to be getting into a variety of topics, but fundamentally, I would say that today's show, the theme is what's next. It's what are we feeling? How do we feel right now? We've got Trump in, yet things are not quite going as we hope. There's this massive advancement of AI and data centers and the digital surveillance state that seems to only have ramped up in the past couple of months. And we're looking around and seeing, okay, what are we doing? And we should be preparing, or should we? And, if you know Scott or myself, you know that we're both very much so on the be prepared side of things. And so we're going to be talking about what kind of preparations are we both making. This isn't like a super prep heavy in terms of the nuts and bolts of it, but it's this bigger picture because both he and I sense that something significant is shifting and that there is some sort of event on the horizon that will change a lot about our way of life. And it's not a fear-based perspective. I think actually one of the best analogies is the flood, the story of Noah and the flood, that there is a sense, God spoke to him and said, there's a flood coming. And that's my feeling. There's a flood coming. The evil has become too rampant on this earth. Their technology has become too powerful. And it's in the hands, I think of, in many ways, I think it's in the hands of Satan. And so what is this flood? What does it look like? Is there a timeline for this? And so that's a lot of what we get into, and just a whole lot more as well. But again, it's much more of a conversation, which I really enjoy, because he's a great conversationalist. He's very smart. And so we're just being, back and forth. And I really hope that you enjoy this discussion as much as I know that I will. So please enjoy the show with my good friend, Scott Kesterson from Bards FM. Mr. Scott Kesterson, the Bards FM. It's always just amazing to have you on. I feel like we should be doing shows almost weekly together, as much as we're in sync and as pleasurable as it is to just sit down and talk to you. But I know you're busy, and I appreciate the time that you've made for us today. So thank you for being here.
Oh, hey, Seth, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure. As we were talking before, I openly suck at responding to people. And whenever you text, I'm like, oh, hey, look at Seth. It's awesome. So it's awesome to be here. So thank you very much.
And it's funny because I will also say that you are one of the longest running podcasts that I've listened to. There's been a lot that they come and go. I'll discover this new podcast and it's like, oh, this is pretty good. Then you start, they start kind of hitting different topics. Like, I'm very different than that person, and you realize that it doesn't line up. But you're such a consistent voice. And the funny thing is I think 2 or 3 years ago, I think one of our first interviews, that's when my mom first heard you, and she was like, this guy's great. And now, like, almost weekly, I get a text message from her, and she's sharing me one of your podcasts. She's like, oh, you should listen to this, because Scott was talking about this. And so, you're part of our inner circle, part of our inner community, which we'll get into today. But it's great to have you on.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Now, it means a lot. And you're the same. It's interesting because a group of us were talking the other day, a similar topic of like, what have been the voices that have followed this arc of craziness, And quite frankly, there just aren't that many out there that are left of where things started, but really amped up, which was 2016, 2017. And then to see where people are today, whether it was on, people were heavy on Twitter initially, and then they had that nuke happen there, and then the purge that happened on YouTube. And a lot of people just didn't recover and never really got their feet underneath them whatever reason. I mean, as I tell people many times, and I love when people tell me they're going to start a podcast. It excites me. But I have a kind of a standing rule when they say, like, can you help me out? And I'm like, yes, I'm happy to, but I want you to do at least 10 or 15 shows before I will, because you got to get those underneath you to understand really what it's about. As you know very well, these programs don't just happen. They take a lot of time, take a lot of prep. Even like just a simple thing like this, what you have in the view here at the studios, it's a mess right now because I'm in the process of redoing it. And I know you were saying that you're going to be redoing yours. Those things don't seem like a lot, but they are. They take hours of your time of planning and doing, and that interrupts your production schedule and so forth. So, I mean, there's a lot to it, and to do a good program and do quality, which you do, and I compliment you. You've had some great interviews, by the way.
Thank you.
It just really, I'm saying this professionally and very respectfully. Like when I see the interviews you have, it pushes me in a good way because I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Like, okay, let's look what we get on, and not in competition, but it's the respect of the audience which you're bringing to your audience, and it's that sort of programming. It's a friendly competition, but not in an aggressive way. It's more of a pushing the limit and pushing the bar, and that's what I love so much about good programming. Because, and you're one of them. It's take a look over and you have somebody on, and it's like, wow, that was a great interview. Now, what am I doing to reflect that same sort of quality for my audience? And so those are the sorts of things that the iron sharpens iron, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's funny because you're one of the few people of the podcasters I know, a handful of, and obviously you meet a lot, but you're one of the few that really any guest I've ever had on, if you were to say, hey, can you connect me with that person? Like, I'd be more than happy to. Because I want to see. Actually, Mike Adams is similar. Like I've introduced a lot of awesome. His guests to him, and likewise, he's also introduced me to people that have become some of my favorite guests. And that's what there's those people that you I feel like we're on the same team, right? Because we both have the same goal. Like there's a lot of mutual crossover, but there's zero competition in there, which is really good actually. And I don't think it's the same with a lot of the other bigger, much more mainstream podcasters. From what I'm seeing, it's quite cutthroat with how they do things.
Yes, I mean, it really is. Mike is a great example. I tease Mike all the time. We were laughing the other day because I've been trying to get him back on the show. I love having Mike on, and we get along great. He likes being on. And you're talking about somebody that does not respond well to text. That's Mike. So
I know.
So, and I mean, he would totally agree. So it finally, like we're all set up on Signal, and he does disappearing text. So if he sees it and he doesn't respond to it, it vanishes, right? So finally I got him to respond the other day. So he's coming on later this month. I'm super excited about it. We're going to really dig into artificial intelligence as he's doing it. But there's no better resident expert in the nation right now than Mike Adams, talking about general AI and also talking about what he's building, which is ethical AI, it's a world I don't know enough about, but I'm anxious to hear what he has to say. So it's really good. Yeah,
it's great. And it's interesting because, like you mentioned the interviews I've done, and that's oftentimes what I've become known for is the interviews. Like I've had some, that have gone mega viral, millions of views, because it hits that right kind of tone. But what I've always appreciated about your show, and where I always leave feeling inspired, is like, Seth, you got to do just your own narrative show. Because that's what I appreciate about the vast majority of your shows is you're just hopping on, and obviously you're coming prepared with research and you're playing TikTok videos and resources, but it's you kind of giving your perspective and just walking people through what you've discovered, where you're at, what's important, like what are the red flags that you see. And it's so intellectually honest that there's a lot of value in that it's just kind of like you are Bards FM. Whereas I think I've done a lot of my solo shows and people appreciate that, but I'm much more known for the interviews, right? Which is also good. It's a different format. But it's your voice, which is the voice of Bards FM, that I think that, keeps people coming back, which I think that's in some ways like that. It's kind of, you've reached it's probably the most difficult place to reach. In my experience as a podcaster, the most difficult place to reach is being able to hold someone's attention just with your own narrative for an hour or 2 hours, especially when you're doing as many shows as you are. So I think it's oftentimes been very inspiring to me. It's like, I need to spend more time just doing what Scott's doing, sharing my thoughts. Where am I at? It's really important.
Appreciate that a lot. I mean, where interviews, I use interviews as a way to break pace. So, like you're saying, it's I do a lot. I mean, my morning show has taken on a really interesting flavor. It's currently called Bended Knee. I think I'm reframing. I'm working on the name. I think we're probably going to shift just to renaming it called Bards AM to try to clarify the brand a little bit. And there's really no specific topic, but I kind of have an objective in the morning that everybody's waking up. I do it at 7 Pacific, it's 10 Eastern, but one way or another, everybody still has their coffee in the hand, right? And I really try to make an approach that we don't destroy the day, leave people with something to think about, but don't destroy the day. The evening shows, the Bards FM show, is where I stick most of my interviews. I mean, all of them. And I use those more as a breaking of pace for myself. So I talk a bit, and then if I start to find myself looping into repetitive narratives, which happens when you're doing that, because you'll pick up on a theme and you'll bounce the theme from the morning to the night, expand on it, say in the evening more. The nice thing about bringing on interviews and really pushing that level of who we can get on is letting them just talk and tell their story and letting it filter out however that happens. I have a ton of respect for good interviewing. You do great interviews. Tucker Carlson does great interviews. And a lot of that is just getting out of the way of the subject and letting them talk, as you know very well, letting them tell their story. And I'm just in talking of like one of the most recent benchmark interviews, and I say this from an inspiration point of view, I'm going to give it to Tucker Carlson because he just brought on Anna Kasparian. And I don't know if you've seen that interview, but
I've seen clips of it going around. She's the blonde woman, right? Younger or middle, middle
Young
age.
Turks.
Yeah. Yes.
Young Turks. Very. I mean, I'll be straight. I have never enjoyed her. She's just highly caustic. But in absolute respect, she came on to Tucker's show and just laid out why she didn't want to come on and why she was there. And they had one of the most awesome interviews, and even saying like, we don't agree on these topics, but here's what we do agree. And I think it's for me, that's kind of the next approach is how do we bring people on? Who do we bring on that aren't just going to be confirmation bias? I want to be hearing voices that we can have legitimate conversations and not get into some, spitting match at each other.
Yeah.
But to listen. And that's because, for my own sake, I have such a crazy background in Afghanistan, but one of the things that I did so much of was just sitting down with people, whether it was a bad guy Taliban or whether it was a warlord, they're just as bad, some political leader. And we would and I'm receiving this through translation most of the time, but man, the conversations that we would have and just what you learn from people when you listen, that's an exercise that I think that is so profound is that when we start to re-listen. And it's also one of the reasons, and this is not a stilt to anybody, it's just, but one of the reasons that I've stayed as primarily audio is because I can show by stats that people to listen through is crazy. Like to this day, there's 3,800 episodes or something up. And
just looking at that.
To listen.
Yeah. Like I just had it up. Yeah. 50 million downloads across 3,600 episodes.
Yeah, there's a few. So we're actually officially officially hit our 50 millionth download about the second week in September. So we're going to make it a big week.
Incredible.
But it's, and I thank you for that because it is incredible. I remember when I first started, I thought, what would it be like if you had 10,000, 10,000 followers, right? But I think that when we start to listen to one another and we really listen, we're going to stop with some of this political bipolarism that we're just played with right now. And it's not getting us anywhere. And it's such a divisive environment. We align in almost an idolatry fashion towards people, towards things, and we just stop hearing the other side. Just because someone is left or right, within there, the truth always sits somewhere in the middle, and there's a lot to learn on both sides. Especially, I'm not a per se green person. I would call myself more a naturalist in the Teddy Rooseveltian sense, right? But listen, there's some things that they bring up that we have to start facing. I was talking to a journalist one day, this is way back, and they were writing for New York Times or something. And we were having a great conversation, these were great conversations. And he just laid a question out. He goes, I go through Montana. He was working down in the area of Ennis, Montana. And he says, I just have a question for you. So I want you to explain this to me. He said, we talk about city planning and we talk about clean, organized design. And he said, we get pushback from people that their land is junk cars on it, and they cut an American flag on it in a rundown place, and weeds are growing everywhere. Is that what you call freedom? And you sit back and you're like, well, I mean, it's an important question because it gets to core value. What do you respect? And if you really look at it, it's not a core value, because we should be stewarding our land and stewarding the things in honor of God the best we can. So my point is, when we get past the rhetoric and we start to listen to one another, we should never have the objective that we're going to agree on everything, but we should have the intent that we're going to listen and grow from it. During Trump's first term, I ran a super PAC called Kilroy Rising, and it was all made up of special operations veterans. And we did what we did in Afghanistan. We just went out and met with people, but a lot of this were the fringe people that we would have called. It's funny. They were tin hatters there. Today they're mainstream. It's like the people talking about chemtrails. Wow. And, the people talking about vaccines, all those crazy ones, And we had a meeting, is the way it ended up. And as I had a small community get together, and as I walked up, there were two of us. And of all the times that we had Vice News with us filming this, and I walked up in front and something didn't feel right. And as I asked a couple questions before I started talking, I suddenly realized what had happened is that whatever brought it all together, the group on the right of my right, so it was, if you were in the audience, it would be their left, but as I'm facing the audience, the group on my right were all Hillary Clinton liberal supporters. And on my left was all, and they were dressed. They were local militia. This was in Lima, Ohio, not too far from you. And I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh. And I mean, it was insane when we were having this conversation. They were at each other's throats, and the kind of the coup d'etat of this hit the climax of stupid was somebody was talking about the illegals here, and they were making a comment on the Hillary side on their need to have rights to be here. And the other side, the comment came out, and it was on the militia side. It was like, these people don't wash their hands and touch our salad, and then we get sick. And I was like, okay, we've now hit peak stupid, literally peak stupid right now. And it was so disruptive that on the liberal side, we'll just call it the Hillary side rather than the liberal side, the Hillary side, one of the people got up, and a buddy of mine, Special Forces Delta operator, veteran, awesome friend, great man in Christ, steps up beside her, and he puts his hand on her thigh, and he says, ma'am, I'm a U.S. veteran, Special Forces. Would you mind saying, I know where he's going. I trust him. Would you just stay with me, and I'll sit with you? She sat back down. Now, what's amazing, Seth, is I just kind of had it with everybody. I was just like, what is wrong with everybody here? And I just gave him this like fatherly lecture. It's like, we're Americans here. But let's go to the Declaration of Independence. Let's go to the Constitution. Let's just talk about things. It doesn't say anywhere in there we're all supposed to agree on everything. And you know what was amazing is at the end of this conversation, all that division in the aisle went away. We finished the talk. We prayed. Everybody got up, started talking to each other, shaking hands. Vice News comes up to me, and they're like, what just happened? I said, what you just witnessed is what we are as Americans. We stopped being political, and we started being people of a republic. And that to me is, we've had some very divisive times. I'm not going to tell you I haven't been divisive on the show, but as we move forward here, and you mentioned this before, kind of a spiritual shift going on, and there is, and we really need to start listening to one another more and getting past the extremism of biases and just taking things for base value. What does winning mean? Well, and or what does losing mean? These sort of extremism. It's like, what are we doing for this nation? What are we doing for the children? what are we doing for the prosperity and sovereignty of our country and our individuals? Those are the key issues. Right?
Well, I'll just throw a little quick kind of anecdote in there, and then I've got a different topic I want to jump into. But so when we were in Ohio, we lived in this kind of nicer neighborhood, a lot of doctors and lawyers, and it was mostly conservative. And there was one woman that had we're big into permaculture and everything, and she we hate lawns, right? So it's okay, how can I turn out lawn into something that produces food? This one woman had this beautiful property, all native plants. She brought in a permaculture native expert once every month to come in, and she just had this magnificent yard, property. It was just so full of life and bees and everything. The neighbor next to her, but she was a local teacher at a college or something. She was as liberal as it gets. Even to the point where she wasn't having kids because she was worried that we're taxing the earth too much, right? So she didn't refuse to have kids. And she was older. She's probably in her 60s. Now, the neighbor was someone that was very conservative, right? Pro-America. Okay. The guy was overweight, and he was always out spraying Roundup all over his lawn. And there was always a fight between them because he'd spray his Roundup and get onto her plants, and that could kill her raspberry bushes and stuff. And we're sitting there, and my wife and I are talking. It's well, where do we fall? Because we go to the one woman, we talk to her, and we see eye to eye on the importance of permaculture design and not using massive chemicals and everything. And then the other guy, it's okay, yeah, we talk pro-gun, pro-America, et cetera, but he's also he's not healthy, probably eating a bunch of fast food, where she baked bread. She brought us homemade sourdough, right? And it was just this funny thing of we're not either of these. They both get certain parts right, but to say that she's wrong. The neighbor across from her was a former, I think he was a veteran of some sort, pro-America, and he had this massive Joe Biden flag that he hung up just to anger her, right? So it was just this funny little dynamic that was happening in the neighborhood, but actually ideologically, in so many ways, we saw eye to eye with her. Obviously, but then when she came to our house to get us to sign some sort of pro-abortion political thing, and that's I think when the truth came out, and I'm I'm not signing that. I'm sorry, you know what I mean? And so that's when the cracks fell. Then I put my American flag up and my back the blue flag, and I think I had my don't tread on me flag at some point, and I think that's when things kind of fell apart, and she realized that she wasn't going to talk to us anymore. But it was still though just this funny principle of where's the line, right? So. I'll let you respond to that. Then I'll jump into.
I think it's a great example, and I think it's at the core of what we're challenged with these days. I mean, it really is. I mean, I live out here, 10 miles out of town, and good sized acreages around us, and then my parents live in town, about 50 miles away. And every community has its dynamic. Right? There is no perfect community. And I think this is what I was talking to a lot this morning is the idea, what is community? And I think what you described a perfect community, a perfect example. There's all sorts of diverse ways of being. What we're missing in a lot of what we're doing is we've lost common respect for one another. Because you are this, you are everything wrong. Because you are that, you are either everything right or everything wrong. And that's what I refer to frequently as political bipolarism. It's just, there's no in between. And yet the Republic by design requires that we have diverse views, but that we have debate and discussion to find the best way, which is coming together forward. And that's part of power of sovereignty. And we just don't get that very well these days. And it's so much of that has been manufactured by our political class. And it's just a very sad statement. And where it's taking now, what I'm finding, and I think in a very loose scriptural sense, the remnant's role is to do what you're talking about. We need to be in that middle going, hey, I can hear you, and I can hear you, and we can all, and I don't have to sit with both of you at the same table, but you need to learn something here, that we're not supposed to all be getting the same way of thinking. I mean, it's just because one person has one view doesn't mean that they're all wrong or all right. And that's why I go back to this interview Tucker did with Anna Kasparian. Man, if there's one figure on the web that I've listened to that I just seriously, I'm like, Anna, oh my gosh. Then a pivot happened And it stunned me. Again, I'm giving hat tip to when people have the courage to say it. And so when this whole Epstein debacle blew up, she came out on her channel and said, this group of people in MAGA that's standing up for truth, I align with them. And I'm like, that took some stones to do, because your base is not going to love that. And she talked about that on Tugger. And she's just, when you listen to her and you kind of get out of the extremism of rhetoric, which is a reminder that we all can do it. Okay, I can get on my rants and forget things, step on toes all over the place. But when we kind of get down to this place of trying to look at some common sense things and what's human, what is it to be a great person walking in with Christ in our lives, and what does that mean to you? And it's when we forget those principles and we start to identify as I'm Republican or I'm a Democrat or I'm a this or I'm a that, it's like, you're not listening anymore. The ideologies of this nation are about coming together, leaving behind what you were, coming together to forge together something greater in vision. And principally, I mean, and I don't know your audience well, but I'm just saying, I don't think there's any question of where I sit. But what is interesting is our founding fathers were deep men of faith. And the more that you read their writings and the more you see where they were true deep men of faith. And they understood that principle. They built an architecture around a concept of what we loosely call today the body of Christ, which is there's diversity, but there's unity in a common moral base of what we're trying to achieve. What has happened, I think, and was a pastor recently that said this, and I forget his name, but I'm going to grab his words. We have an institution built on a moral society, and we're living in a society that's do as thou will. And the two are massively conflicting, and we're losing respect for the fact of people being. We should not, teasing is one thing, but intentionally provoking people to try to present anger, it takes reason on both sides, right? And respect. And so your example is a good one. I think there's just so many out here. I'll just leave this and we can go on. But when someone asked me the other day, it's like, what is community to you? And I said, well, and I talked about that in this morning's show, was community is not, I see this a lot, like, let's get a piece of land and let's do little tiny houses and we'll build a compound together. And I'm like, that's the farthest thing I ever want to do, right? Because you're trying to manufacture something that takes time to build. So when I talk about, this is an awesome community that I have nearby, and it's completely dysfunctional. Let me be very clear about that. There's all sorts of personalities out here. But what it defines is everybody's doing their thing on their land. Everybody's trying to make their land better, raise cows, a garden, whatever that is. Some people have stuff going on inside their families, and some people are getting old and having trouble there, and there's a variety of things. And everybody's got their little thing about their land. But here's where the rubber hits the road. It's my neighbor that's busy with 3 different careers that drives by and texts me or calls me and says, hey, did you see that your cow has got a problem on the lower acreage? Did you see that? No. And I jump on my ATV and go down there. Or it's the day that I'm out doing something stupid, taking the Jeep with my trailer out to feed the cows and thinking I could go through soft mud and I get it stuck up to the rim, and my neighbor calls me on the phone and says, and he's seeing me, he's busy as can be, and he's like, are you stuck out in the field? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I'll be right over with the tractor. That's community to me, because it's not the getting together, singing Kumbaya. We a lot of things we're not going to agree on, but when you need them and people are looking out for one another, they're there, and you're willing to do the same for them. That takes time, but that's real community. You don't have to sit around at the night and look at the stars and drink together and whatever you're going to do. I mean, I'm too busy for that. But when it matters, you're there, and that to me is what we need to be building a lot of to get through where we're going.
What's interesting is that literally all morning I had a meeting with a really good friend of mine and my wife. And this really good friend of mine who I've known since I worked actually a long time ago back at the Epoch Times, we worked together and great relationship there. And he is an expert at community building. And so, but online, right? If I had to figure out how to build online communities that can then bridge offline, right? Because, and you probably think your 401k is safe, that it's growing, that it'll be enough for your retirement. But what if it's not? Here's the truth most people never hear. Your 401k was never designed to make you wealthy. It was created in a corporate boardroom to shift retirement costs and investment risk onto you. Designed to keep your money trapped, exposed to Wall Street crashes, inflation, and uncertainty you can't control until now. Right now, Americans are taking back control by turning to real assets like gold and silver. Noble Gold Investments has helped thousands protect their future by converting part of their retirement savings into physical gold and silver so they can stop worrying about the market and start sleeping better at night. So talk to Noble Gold today and learn how safe and easy it is to roll over your 401k into a tax-advantaged precious metals IRA without penalties or headaches. Visit goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 to get your free wealth protection kit, including a step-by-step guide to get started. It's time to get your money out of the danger zone and into something real. Again, that's 626-654-1906 or goldwithseth.com. It's interesting because one of the roles that your podcast looks, I remember actually back in 2020 listening to you, right? Back when I lived at a rental house in Ohio. I remember, and your pillars, right? Was it 7 pillars? I think it was.
7
right?
pillars of county by county.
Yep.
Yeah.
County by county. And then you covered a lot of the preparedness stuff. Actually, you're the first person that I ever heard the acronym CBDC was you. And I remember funny enough, I remember the exact moment I was in I had a safe room, I had a cinder block safe room that was hidden in my basement with a vaulted door and everything. I had all my guns, I had a couple safes in there. And I was actually listening to you when I was repainting the safe room and doing some work in there. I first heard CBDC. And so I continued to hear, you covered a lot of preparedness stuff, seeds, gardening. And that was really influential in our process of preparedness. And so fast forwarding a little bit, we got into the Ukraine war. Anybody that was listening to you or even me or say Mike Adams heard a lot of the similar narratives, right? We knew that there was going to be, because of how the Ukraine war affected things with exports and everything, we're expecting empty shelves, diesel problems. There's all kinds of different things that were these, I'd say, kind of geopolitical threats that were coming. And there's a lot of urgency and preparedness. And that phase of our life, we probably spent 2 years doing like hardcore prepping. We bought a freeze dryer. We had 50 chickens. I was freeze drying batches of 100 eggs. We were gardening. We had massive gardens, 5-gallon buckets of tomatoes coming in, processing them. And it was a really intense period. And what's interesting is that CDS water by chance? Or is that just regular water?
No, it's just well water.
Oh, because oftentimes I've got my same mason jar with my CDS in it. I'm sipping on it.
I won't drink. I don't drink out of plastic. I usually drink out of copper or glass.
Yeah, so I've got my copper cup in my glass. But but anyway, we're covering a lot of prepping and everything, and doing a lot, and then probably midway last year or so, I really got inspiration to write a book. Right, so I'm actually just in the finishing kind of stages of the book, Prep Like Noah. And, which I look forward to talking to you more about. But since Trump got in, it's very interesting, kind of like this trajectory of how things have kind of happened. It's like, Trump wins the election. There's this giant sigh of relief for a lot of the people that, kind of were not necessarily like ultra pro Trump, but, that understood that, hopefully he's going to uphold the Constitution and get rid of a lot of these kind of negative and communist influences in our government, et cetera. And it seems like that, especially in talking to a lot of the companies that I know that, whether they do affiliate stuff like Satellite Phone Store or Storable Food, a lot of them saw a major drop off in their business since Trump got in. I think a lot of people in this country became much more comfortable, especially the people that were before much more like under Biden were prepping, right? And so there's like the timing kind of shifted, but what's now where things are at, and this is why I really want to kind of hear your thoughts, is that there's before, like say 2 or 3 years ago, the need to prep and become more prepared and self-resilient was I'd say more surface and more fear driven, at least for us. But where things are at right now, I think a lot of people are perhaps experiencing this, is that there's something deeper going on now. And something I've been really studying a lot, which I think I might produce like a little mini documentary about, is there's some sort of event the elites seem to be preparing for, whether it's magnetic pole shift or something. Even I saw, which is kind of crazy, is that when you look into pole shift and everything, you see that there's a lot of reallocation of water, right? So what was once above water becomes below water, et cetera. And I saw someone actually that overlaid a map of the regions of America that were, after this supposed pole shift, would be above water. And if you know who the biggest landowner in America is, Mr. Bill Gates, they overlaid a map of all the land that Bill Gates was buying. It was almost the exact map of all the land that stays above water, right? Post event, which was wild to me. And so I feel like that now there's something, it's like, it's interesting, I called the book Prep Like Noah, because the best way to describe is that I have this feeling that there's a flood coming. And it's not something that's like, you should be scared of it, but you should be aware of it. It's like the rain is starting. And I feel like that, especially now that Trump's gotten in, and you can see that he's done some good things. I won't take that away from him. However, I'm like highly concerned with what's happening with AI. Like AI is like the existential threat to this entire world. And if you see the data centers, the relationship with Palantir, you see all of this coming together, and it seems like there's also a scramble. Like there's some sort of timeline that leads us to like 2027 to 2030, where there's a window that the elites have to get some sort of control system in place, and they're frantically trying to get to it. And I don't think they're going to be successful. However, there's this deep, almost like a spiritual sense that, I can't pretend to know what it was like to be Noah, but it feels like it's like kind of like the days of Noah again. And there's something coming, and the preparedness, the need for it now is very different. And what was before, say 2 or 3 years ago, preparing for me was all about accumulation of survival supplies, right? And how to defend those supplies to make sure that your family is the one that comes out on top in your neighborhood, right? Even like turning away people that come asking for food and all these things that actually seemed quite, kind of oppositional to my core beliefs, right? Of humanity and everything. But it was also like, well, if you're surviving, and listen to Mike Adams like, okay, make sure you're proper. You've got your sniper perches, how many yards out are, so that way if someone's coming through your front gate, it's at 1,000 yards, and you can, you're already dialed in, but now what's interesting is that the core of what I think is important for preparedness now is community. And so that's what this meeting was this morning, is that like, that's a project that we're doing that I think I'm really excited about, which I'm not gonna get into now because it's still early on, but we want to start building a community that allows people to connect and kind of form their local communities. And we're very focused on that, but it's a very different place than where things were before. But anyways, I'd love to hear it. I'm just kind of trying my best to summarize what could take me an hour to explain in that little kind
of you did a great job.
Chunk right there. But that's where we're at right now. It's like we're this sense of the need to prepare, but it's a different type of preparation than before.
I want to start with something that I've kind of been talking to this. And first of all, everything you're saying I'm 100% with. There is a shift. There's an urgency with this shift that isn't fear, but it's more about going a different direction. I think the way I'd say it. And the metaphor in the Bible, the wide gate and the narrow gate. You've got to make a choice right now. And the wide gate is the easy path. And they're going to do everything they can to make it seem impossible and to leave their system. And they've laid that noose down there. And I'm with you 100% on AI. Your conclusions, by the way, time frame and the coming issue, I haven't heard you say that, only because I don't watch your show all the time. We have said we are talking the exact same thing. That's always a kind of a confirmation.
Yeah.
I mean, I have come to the exact same conclusion, Seth. And you're looking at the rate of movement. You don't need biblical prophecy or anything to look at this. You just look at the stats. I mean, look at the rate of movement of things. Listen to many of the voices out here that are the voices of dissent. Catherine Austin Fitts is a good one. And watch how fast they're trying to move this model. The simple thing I say is, We're dealing with an elite that have been invisible for hundreds of years. What has changed in the last 8 years, in particular, since Trump has come to power, but in particular since Trump, because that has suddenly allowed them to come in the open, expose themselves fully, and race as fast as they can to the finish line. Because the risk is, and you said it, is when you expose yourself like that, you're going to wake people up, and people are going to defy. You're going to move too fast. He had this thing in the bag. Seriously, they could have stayed silent and quiet and done this over a span of 2050, 2075, and humanity wouldn't even know what hit it.
Yeah.
And it would just be a silent death.
The boiling frog.
And there'd be a few, exactly, perfect analogy. And yet they didn't. And something's changed, which is the urgency. And I'm not an end of time theorist person. I'm not the apocalyptic view person. I actually believe that the strength we have is, and this is kind of, if people haven't heard me talk about this, they're going to be like, what? But I mean, I've had some very profound experiences in the last couple of years, last 18 months in particular, that have really transformed my view on what winning looks like. And winning ultimately is community, love, and forgiveness. That's truly the core of this. And I don't mean love like, the hippie love. I use that term. People don't get offended by it, but I mean, it's just like, everybody's going to be loved.
I mean, the Tavistock love.
Right. It's real. It's truth. It's respect for one another and appreciation for one another. And it's accountability, which is a big thing, right? So, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's an acceleration happening that's at a phenomenal rate right now. And AI is the existential threat. It's out there. We're looking at it. And at the same time, we're being called to do things and not waste time if we're paying attention. And that's, to me, as I say, God is talking to everybody right now. And the question is, are you going to trust in him, or are you going to convince yourself that for whatever reason that your obstacles you put before you are going to tell you no? And a good example, I just went through this. I've been 3 years here of running cattle on the property. Keep in mind, I knew nothing about cattle 3 years ago. Okay. And got a nudge and cattle, and had somebody that helped me for a while. And then I sold that herd and I bought a new herd, and 16 mamas that were pregnant and a bull. And now that's grown to 41, including calves in my herd. And I've learned the hard way about, how animals go through fences, even when you think they're strong, and all these sorts of things, and the amount of time it takes. But it's taken me a while to figure out how to set up a really good workflow for winter and for processing, loading in and loading out of cattle. Because part of having 41 isn't to have 41, but it's to be able to sell off a few in the fall and then pay for your hay for the winter, and just a break-even model, right? And I suddenly had a really clear vision on where I was going to go. And I'm still dragging my feet, and I'm in prayer, and God's like, do it. And I start with my normal, like, okay, but my budget is, it's like, whose money is it? I'm like, all right, so I do it. And it's amazing. The minute that happens, I make a call to a friend, and who has an excavator and have the excavation company. She's like, we're in chaos right now. Here's who you need. He's literally working across the street from you. And I call him. She introduces me. He calls me in 30 minutes. He's like, I'll come over today and take a look. He's busy on a project. He goes, I can work you in. He brings over a team of guys, and literally at a cost that was well within my budget, they excavate and set the whole thing up in 5 days. And it's just like, my point of this is, don't waste time right now. Like, start moving forward and making things happen. And sometimes you're going to have to hire somebody. Sometimes you're going to do it yourself. But don't waste time, because there is an urgency upon this. And then you have to get to the bigger purpose. It should not be fear-based. We're preparing for a shift in something that is coming. And you need to be listening, because whatever chaos is going to ensue, it's not going to be the zombie apocalypse. I don't believe it. I don't believe that it's going to be the roaming bands of hordes of warlords that are going to try to steal your stuff. I'm with you on all the other things that, when I was just, like, when I finally got the bug, which was really hit me in 2020, Amazon was surprised when they did, Amazon or other delivery drivers, should say it this way, FedEx or UPS was shocked when they weren't making a delivery every day. No matter where I was ordering from. The flow of stuff. I bought all my tools again for doing timber framing. I built a model around doing everything by hand so I didn't have to rely on power tools. I've got a custom-made scythe that comes from Vermont. I've got all the things I need so that I can survive pretty much. And that was an urgency-driven thing. And trying to get to a place where we could sustain without power and with sort of things. But as we move forward here, it's just a very calm but pressing issue. Like, don't waste time. Let's get this going. Let's continue to build community and let's get things done. And it's preparation for a greater call on this time that's ahead of us. And whatever that is, I don't think there's any question something big is coming, but you can't face it with fear. You just have to look at it and go, wow, this is the coolest time in life to ever live. The bigger question, for people is, are you willing to trust in God enough to say, I'm not going to follow what they tell me I have to follow? And this is where I think the biggest trap has been set, and it's a narrative trap that a lot of people aren't recognizing. So I'll use the term winning because MAGA is doing this a lot. And I'm saying hardcore MAGA. It's not a slight to anybody, but it is kind of a cultish way of hearing things. Okay. And it's everything Trump does lately. It's like, we're winning. I guess we're winning with $50 billion investment of AstraZeneca putting in pharmaceutical companies in the States, and if you're paying attention, it's like, what jobs is that really going to create? The answer is it's going to create very few, if any, and it's not going to be jobs that are making America great. We're just making America pharmaceutical, right? And that's that sort of thing. So what's happened with that? And why is that winning? Why does that seem as winning? And it's, in my opinion, where it falls to is this. We have a choice in the way we should have a choice in the way we want to live. But the elite somewhere along the way decided that we were going to have a plan. We have a plan that we have to follow. So what you hear is with this, it's capstoned under the fourth industrial revolution. And it's capstone under the golden age. These two terms is, this is the way we're going. You have no choice. You can't stop what's coming. So we can't stop AI, we're told. We can't stop the digital economy. We can't stop synthetic biology. We can't stop IoB, IoT. We can't stop robotics. It's coming. And if we don't do this, then China's going to beat us and we're going to become slaves with China. So that narrative gets framed, and instead of being able to say, can we have a discussion about this? You're either with us or against us. And people look at it and they're like, well, we can't stop this. Well, yes, you can. Say no. But we're not willing to. And so then you step into that river of crazy, and everything becomes winning when it relates to investment in the US, when it relates to new businesses. It doesn't matter what it's doing, and we have no ethical framing to this. AstraZeneca, of all things, to call that winning is like they were the ones that brought out the clot shot that killed the most people right off the bat. I mean, even before we got into the accountability phase, they pulled that shot off the market. It's like, hello, like that's not a winning thing. When you start talking about AI data centers, it's like, okay, how are we dealing with food scarcity for children in the inner cities? Can we eat AI? And we're talking trillions of dollars. What are we doing for our farmers? Have we created tax-free operations for farmers? Have we had an ability to excuse their debts so they can continue on? Are we promoting even a program that says get rid of your toxic lawn and start building gardens? Do we have new regulation or an EO saying that HOAs don't have control over people's lawns and they have to be able to grow food? These are big issues. These are issues that systemically change a society. These are issues that get us back to core values. The Victory Gardens program, which was launched by Eleanor Roosevelt, when it was the original concept of it came out of World War I, but she took it and ran with it during World War II. It was the agriculture department that fought her on it because they were afraid that they were going to outproduce the commercial agriculture. Well, it turned out that year that there were 10 million tons of food produced agriculturally in the commercial market, and there were 10 million tons of food that were produced on the private side in people's houses. And then what follows? all you have to do is just follow the trend. I mean, people come back from war, we push into suburbia, we start being pushed into all the war on traditional way of eating ensues. You know, you can't eat bacon, can't eat butter, you need to eat all the hydrogenated oils, and so it begins. And buy everything at the shopping mart, buy your Hungry Man TV dinner. That as we get to that point, right? It's crazy, and it was all engineered to keep us away from being sovereign in our food production. These are fundamental issues. If a society doesn't eat and feed itself well, society will die. If a society doesn't continue to reproduce and have an incentive and a hope that you can have a big family, a society will die. Our birth rate right now is 1.6. It is a death spiral. And unless we turn the tide on that quickly, we will be extinct as a society as we know it in 2 generations, period. There's no stopping that train. China or Japan is down to 1.2. And so if we aren't realizing these threats and what the real threat is, and when you're playing this narrative that is, we need the 4th industrial revolution, what does that deliver to you? I mean, what, are we going to get excited about the fact that they were just able to create a fertilized fetus out of stem cells and they don't even need a man and a wife anymore and do that in a lab in a test tube? What are we talking about here? Or that they're excited about the fact that they're finally revealing the fact that they've been doing human cloning, but now we're going to commercialize it so you can have a human clone and have your organs you need that can harvest it. I mean, this is what the promises are of the future. And if you sit back and you ask yourself, are you a moral society? Are you doing this? This whole discussion changes. But when we do as thou will and just race with it, it's like, oh, that guy is doing this and this guy's doing this, and there's no cohesiveness of accountability. And this is, again, the AI 4th industrial revolution culture. So I say all that to bring it back is that we're being swept up in a tide of insanity right now because we're working off of a narrative that has assumed our compliance without giving us the option to disengage, which is we have to go down this route. And I'm like, no, we don't. And we can have a much better world. Are you familiar with steampunk culture? Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh yeah. I used to be not like super into it, but I was really aware of it. And you have games like Fallout and this kind of stuff that reinforces. Yeah.
Well, I love it from a different point of view. I mean, it's an interesting culture, but I love how their imaginary designs are always analog and yet technologically advanced, right? So, and my point is, I reference it because whether or not those things work, these people are thinking of a different way of existing in a, quote, technological future that is a very different way than we are. And we're locked into this kind of monolithic, like it has to be silicon chips, it has to be AI, it has to be this. And it's like, no, it doesn't. I'm not going there. And there's a dark agenda here. There is no question that there's a channeling of humanity to dumb us down and to make us dependent and to strip away your humanity. And if you know anything about the transhumanist agenda, you understand that these people aren't playing. They are not playing around. They see this as the next step that man can create the next iteration of humankind. And it's like, I'm not playing that. Sorry, I'll disengage. I'll be out here. I'll wither away in my quiet little space, whatever that is. But again, it's the motivations, I think that your point, the shift, and it is a spiritual shift in this world. It's a shift of seeking common ground with people. It's a shift of finding the communities that we can build. It's even as I reflect, it's so timely because I was talking about this. I've been talking about this very recently, which is we have a community in the Bards community, loosely kind of framed as Bards Nation, that since we started talking about county by county and the 7 pillars, I have seen an unbelievable level of knowledge built in the community. It's a resource pool. So the real question is, what are you seeking when you prep? I think that's a big question. Are you trying to be an island and do all things? And you learn pretty quickly that you can't. Even the Amish can't do it. But when we get to a place of understanding that we're trying to build the best we can, but we need knowledge, and we also need support from community. Now you're starting to build a model it's very spiritually connected within your community. So what I do and what someone else does may not be exactly mutually supportive, but everybody benefits from this, is the idea. And that means that I can call on somebody and they may have an idea that works or not works. I have the ability, like I said, in my community to reach out to people, but even in the digital community, it's there. And that's what's amazing. There's a guy in our community that has come to a couple of our festivals, and I came to know him, and he is like longtime family rancher, longtime family farmer. And he's been super supportive of my process. And he just like, hey, anytime you have a question, give me a call. That's what we're talking about in community. So you have the local community and we have a broader community, and it's people all sharing knowledge and sharing their support for one another. The work falls on each of us. That's the accountability piece. It's not like we get to farm it out. Once in a while, we hire a contractor. Yes, but it's part of a process of trying to move things along. But we're steering and shepherding that vision as we go forward. Not just sitting on the sideline going, hey, this is a great show I'm looking at, can't wait to have tiny houses. We can all sit and drink beer or whatever, it's like, no, not happening.
Yeah. It's not the commune community, right?
No. And it's so true. I mean, I think one of the things that's probably surprised me the most, and this has been a fairly recent revelation because I saw it a lot during COVID, of the unpreparedness. So I can go with that. I don't have a problem. And it was a good wake-up call, and people really mobilized to it. I literally, within the community of Bards Nation, there were thousands of people that started doing gardening. And it's not like we built an organization and a nonprofit. We just like, hey, let's just talk about it and let's just share knowledge. And that to me is what makes things really work, because you're not relying on like I've got a flyer to remind me to do this from the organization, or I'm paying a membership fee for this. It's just like, just take and empower yourself. That's the idea. And the communities are to support. So we saw the growth, and we've seen the growth happen. It's really impressive. And we're all at one point or another, many are kind of getting the similar point now. We're kind of reassessing and recalibrating. But then it's this place where you least expect it. People that were, say, actively in the fight against the shot, and people that were technologically aware. And it looks, as I'm kind of mapping out now, this is very loose, but I'm just saying essentially what I think happened is they made the pivot to realize the importance of buying local and supporting local. And some of that gets translated to some version of a Sprouts or a Whole Foods locally, right? But it didn't change the dependency. This is the problem, right? So it's all money driven. So now I'm instead of, I'm going to buy my raw milk, but it's going to be from a commercial dairy raw milk. And it's, so whatever that is. And now these institutions you have financial stresses going on people. You have supply chain logistics issues happening all over the place. You have mandates and local regulation that are trying to crush down on anything commercial. And now there's a sudden wake-up call. It's like, oh, like I need to actually figure a way to grow my own food. And that's where you get this spawning out of this that comes out of like, well, let's all build a commune. It's like, where were you 5 years ago? I'm just saying that it's like, you're one, we've talked about this. I mean, you've done an amazing job. And it's like, where were you in that journey? Because the knowledge that you're trying to seek isn't going to just happen. Talk to somebody this just comes back, and not just the other day, it was quite a while back, but nonetheless, and it was a discussion I was having with them about preparation. And they said, well, we're ready. I said, oh, cool. What are you doing? And it's like, we've got, like, I don't know, some crazy number. Like we've got in, all these special sealed bags. We've got like 10,000 different seeds. I'm like, okay. And they're like, well, when things go bad, we'll start our garden. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to bring this to your attention that you just don't start a garden when things are bad. It takes 3 to 5 months to yield any sort of harvest. And you're lacking the years of experience it takes to be a good gardener. Yeah. And that's just real. It takes, and this garden I built for my parents 5 years ago, and the diligence that my dad has put into it since then. And I was visiting him yesterday, and I'm just telling you, I look at that, I'm like, wow, I built the vision for you. You've tended to the garden literally, and it just looks spectacular when he has it. He's changed the planning method I did a bit, and he's steered it towards their lifestyle, which I'm like, amen. And my dad is like one of these perfectionists, and he's out here, he's like, I got leaf spot on a couple leaves. I'm like, just cut them off. But he's like worried about every plant this way. And I love it. And it shows. That tending care shows. He's built the new watering system. He's put in now drip watering, which we didn't have before, put in new trellising. And these are constant. And my dad is a project guy. He loves it. My mom loves to be in the garden. So between the two of them, it's a daily love and passion. You don't get that by just last minute going, hey, I'm going to throw some seeds in the ground and we're going to grow something. He's gone now to soil monitoring, water monitoring, testing. It's part of his day. It's awesome. And those are things that when you're actively involved in it, you start to understand. Like, there's a lot to all of this stuff of trying to get back to some fundamentals. And for me, real prepping isn't just about stock and food and ammo. It's about the regenerative. And maybe that's the core of it, Seth. I mean, maybe the shift has been more towards the regenerative process of this, not just the, do I have enough ammo to carry me to next week? And what am I going to do with my, and my sniper hides if I get 50 people coming at me instead of 10? That's like, whatever. It's like, how about if we just step away from those doom narratives, which I think is hugely important on the spiritual place in the world. I think that we are shaping negative outcomes if we don't position ourselves to think about regeneration in life.
Something interesting, actually a lot of things interesting you mentioned, but you talked about your kind of no-tech tools. And I remember there was one thing that stuck with me from Mike Adams in one of his prepping ebooks he did. It was no-tech, low-tech, and high-tech, right? Making sure you've got the solution. So you've got, I've got my Milwaukee battery-powered circular saw. I've got my EcoFlow generator that could charge that battery, but I've also got a handsaw that doesn't matter what's going to happen, that handsaw will still work. And taking a step back, to the kind of the flood scenario, right? And looking at, pre-flood, mixing of DNA, rampant evil on earth. And a flood was the solution, right? To, through God's eyes to kind of reset, basically. And so building the ark to rise above it was the solution through. And I feel like if you look at right now how the evil is manifesting, it's almost solely through technology. And actually, I think it's through technology that's not even human in origin. Whether we call it through, it's demons introduced it, or Satan, or aliens, or whatever it is.
100%.
I think that
100%.
The technology is sitting inside of these phones, inside these computers, the microchip technology. I don't think it's actually human technology. Maybe it was harvested from, crash sites, or who knows, right? There's a lot of different speculations of that. But what's interesting is that I feel like that the advent of that technology is what has led to a massive decay in our morality and our lifestyle. And it's taken us so far away from being human. Whereas you mentioned steampunk and people, using mechanical stuff to actually to do amazing things. Go read Ayn Rand and look at, Atlas Shrugged, be blown away by the technology that they're talking about in there that wasn't tied to microchips and electronics, right? And
Agreed.
So if you look forward, it's like, okay, well, and this is, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a prophet, but I just kind of follow my gut. I research a lot and I kind of war game things out all the time. And I feel like that what we're going to see over the next, say, 3 to 5 years is a massive ramp up in the technological prison state, right? The global technocratic state. Increased push for digital IDs, increased push for vaccinations containing more and more payloads of nanotech, heavy. I think a big part of what the chemtrailing is actually putting technology into our bodies that can then be controlled through a control grid. I think this is what I see as their strategy. But I also think that as we're potentially approaching some sort of bigger shift, that we will probably see more natural disasters, and more sporadic. And you could say is it weather warfare, or is it that we've screwed our weather up so much that it's now reacting negatively and we're having floods that are happening that shouldn't be happening, not because, Rainmaker seeded that place, a day ago, but actually because we've just screwed up the ecosystem so much with everything that it's now, it's kind of really kind of, it's like a wheel that starts kind of shaking, or if you ride motorcycles, you start getting the wobbles at high speeds until it just throws you off and you're dead, right? However, I think that understanding how central technology is to what I believe to be Satan's end game of controlling mankind, I almost feel like that the flood that's coming is something to tie into the sun and some sort of electromagnetic event. And I think that's just a feeling, right? That what we're going to see is this increased technology, increased control, but that one day the power just goes out. And as frightening as it is, and as much as I've read so many books on EMPs and grid down stuff, and it's frightening, right? But it's almost like if you look at it from a divine plan, wouldn't that be the best way to the best version of a flood to eliminate the evil, to get rid of their ability to control, is some sort of massive solar flare or whatever it is that takes all of that technology that again, I believe has corrupted mankind in ways that we can't even perceive so profoundly. What if one day all those microchips get fried? All those big data centers, all the AI stuff, it just gets the plug pulled on it. And I feel like that, to me, makes the most sense, because then it forces us to reset back to what it means to be human again, to go out and, instead of having your AI, programmed, battery powered robot mower mowing your yard, you're out there with a scythe, cutting your grass down. Or look, we actually have, there's a company called, I think, American Mower Company. They make these great push mowers, like the circulating ones you see like in the 50s. We've got a couple of those that we bought, because in preparation for something like this. And I just, that's just my feeling is, but it's not a fear-based thing. It's not like, oh, the Chinese are going to, launch EMPs off of a cargo ship and, Club K missile systems. It's not that. It's that there's something divine coming. And while it will be difficult for us, as the flood was difficult for Noah and his family, obviously, but what happens in the process is that entire evil technocratic control grid overnight is done. There's no threat of CBDC anymore. There's no threat of digital ID. There's no threat of drones surveilling and monitoring and tracking. All that stuff is gone overnight. And to me, I don't know, just a sense, like I feel like that's where things are headed. And I think that the elites know that, and they're trying to get in front of it as much as they can. But I think that they're not going to make it. Like I really don't believe that they're going to make it. I think they're trying to. And you can tell, as you mentioned, something has happened. Why is it that they're not planning for this for 2050? Because you were so correct in saying this. If they went just as things are right now, by 2050, people would be walking into whatever VR prison they had waiting for us, gladly, right? But
yeah, it'd be all a celebration.
Anyway, so that's just my sense. Like that's just this feeling I've had lately, and that I need to be making sure that I'm not just preparing for it, but in the reach that I have through the podcast and everything, that I'm helping other people. Like I'm trying to help as many people as possible. Like, hey, this is how you can do things. This is how you can still filter your water. There's so many different ways that it's like, look at how our grandparents, they didn't call it prepping, they called it living, right? And I think that's what we're going to have to go back to.
I agree with all that. I mean, when I do things, you hit it. I've started this model up here with the principle of how do you function with power interruption and how do you function with no power? And I'm at this pretty good place now where I can take a good assessment and go, here's the gap. And there's a couple big ones that have to be addressed. And so we work on those. We work towards those, whatever those look like. But we have to I like to think through, and I would encourage people to do the same. What does the world look like to you when suddenly there is no internet and there is no digital anything? My Jeep's not going to run. Even though my Jeep's a 2010, it's not going to run because it has a digital processor. My ATV is not going to run. My dogs will still live, right? My cows will be alive. My chickens will be alive. The house is still going to be here, but it's going to need candles because it's not going to have power. And are you willing and able to adapt to that? If you're in a place that's dependent on air conditioning because you're in a commercial building or you're in an apartment complex, that's not going to work. So how are you going to stay cool? What are you going to do about refrigeration? I'm in a place where, we have plenty of beef and meat, but it's all in the freezer. So what's a provision? And I've done it. I'm not doing it, but I would have to go through an immediate canning process, like pressure canning. It's one of the reasons I have a big pressure cooker. I use it, but I'm saying that like I would be as fast as I could get that meat out. And I don't desire to do that now because I like the meat we have. It changes its flavor, the texture, but nonetheless, that would be what we're faced with. We have to be ready to make those changes. And there's a lot of things that you're going to have to look at in changing. Even water, like if your water comes from a well, how are you going to get water? What's going to be the issue? Even if you're in the rural area, we're on 2 wells here. And I've got a provision set up that if the power goes out, I can run those wells off a generator, but for how long? And what does that entail? These are big questions. What does it entail to get a hand pump? Well, you just can't put a hand pump on a standard well, because if you do, you're going to replace one with the other. And ideally, you have to bore a different well.
Yeah. Plus, it's 200 feet deep. And so try hand pumping up 200 feet.
Exactly. And there's only one hand pump made, to my knowledge, that can handle that.
I think a flow jack,
it's American flow jack. Yeah, it is. And you run into these problems that become very real. Like one of the solutions here, and I'm just sharing it, but I want to get back kind of what we're talking about is we have the advantage of a hill that sits above the property, and we have unbelievable amounts of water in the winter. So the next big project is to build out about a 250,000 gallon cistern up there that will capture rainwater, and we will be able to cycle up the river water when we can pull it in the winter, and we'll pump it up there. And then I can do everything we need, including the cattle, and have fire protection water all on gravity feed. I don't even need a pump because we're that high up. But those are smart decisions. And I look at as an example of like around the place here, how things were designed. And this is what we run into is we've designed ourselves into a box many times. Like here is an example in a rural area where somebody decided that we're going to have a watering sprinkler system here that's based on pumping water from the bottom of the driveway, which is like almost a third of the mile down the hill. And it's like, who does that? And what's the thinking behind that? Why didn't you put up a gravity feed? It was so easy. And I know how much they spent for that system. I'm like, that's stupid. And that was 10 years ago, So we don't think in terms, we need to get back to thinking in terms of simple and practical. And to your point, in the preparations now, I think this is an exercise that when we do it, we start to really grow. We start to release ourselves and start to realize like, hey, I don't need to have these digital appliances. I can do this. And this is a solution I have to fix this. And there's going to be a lot of improvised field design that some will work well and some will look pretty hick, and that's okay, whatever it works. Like, do you have an inverter to put on your bicycle to spin and keep your freezer going? I don't know. Can you do that? Or, can you generate enough power for 5 freezers if that's what you have? Probably not. But again, we're trying to come up with solutions. And a lot of it's at the core of how we live. We just have to get back to living simply. And what is it that consumes most of our time? And honestly, I'm speaking to this because I do 2 shows a day, 6 days a week. Where do I spend a lot of my time? In front of these screens. And so I make it a point to try to disengage. Like I take one day off, I just shut everything off for the most part. But then even when I'm out on the property, I leave my phone back most of the time because I don't want to be bothered. I don't want the temptation even. I just want to live out here. I love watching animals around the property because their life is so simple. Water and food and reproduction. That's basically, and sleep in there somewhere. But we have to get back to simpler living. And there's no question that the threat that we face right now with artificial intelligence and the looming digital gulag is real. One of the things, and you mentioned it, I want to feather back into something you said about online communities. Started working towards a process of building our own secure social media platform back in 2021. And we didn't launch it until January 2024. And we're on I rent a physical server, not a virtual server, but a physical hard server. And we have it working. We're in the process right now. I've asked for some help, and I've got a team assembling that are coming around to help improve this a bit. But it was really well received. It was a hybrid between kind of a Facebook and a Telegram in that sort of format. And the whole idea was to build online digital communities. So there was a space sharing, but it was safe. And I think that, again, these are going to be things that we have to start moving on pretty quickly. It's not easy. It takes time. The sooner you get going on it, like that took us to find the people that could do it. It took a long time. And then finally, when we got it really going, it took about 8 months to put it together. Test it, beta test it, the whole thing. Well, the point of this is that we're going to go through some transitions here. And there's some looming things that are coming very fast if you're paying attention. And it's coming from whistleblowers. It's coming from the trends of policies that are being put in place. You're going to be seeing coming up, we're going into the period of probably Noahide laws. So those are going to be brutal. That's going to be, even mentioning Jesus gets you a criminal offense, right? Whereas that's being prepped with the anti-Semitic laws that are being put in place right now, that are being funded with at all sorts of crazy levels. All of this against the First Amendment. But as they start to step into this, there is already discussion that they're going to begin a massive purge again. So you're going to be, if you're on a public platform, X, whatever else is out there, you're going to be purged. YouTube, these main ones. If you have views that are contrary to what the state sees, I should say the elites, you're going to get purged. We're going to go through the same purge we did with, there was that kind of Q purge that at one point, massive amount of accounts were wiped out. You're going to see it again. And then what will happen is as you come back to re-engage under a new username, there's going to be new rules that you're going to be engaging with, and new ways of entering in. These technologies are pretty crazy what they're working on, because they're trying to make it to where you'll get onto the net. It'll be a zero trust network. So that was what NSA calls it. And that zero trust network is a principle of, it's a full biometric scan, including your magnetic resonance. That's the latest technology. And that creates a biosignature of you online, which is owned and tied to your social credit score in your online file. So, and essentially everything is moving towards tracking everything. It's everything you do. You have to ask yourself questions like, what's your red line? What are you willing to accept? And I have mine, and that's one of them. It's like, I'm not going past that point. So if that's the case, then you go to the maybe we should call it ethical prepping, something like this. It's like, what are you going to do to stay in touch with your community? And your community in this day and age isn't just who's living by you. That's your immediate community. As I said, prioritize your communities. You have your family, hopefully, is your first community. And then your community that's right around you should be your second community. And then you've got an extended community. And that is friends and you've made and family online that you've digitally connected with. How are you going to maintain those in an environment that becomes hostile to your existence as a free and sovereign person? And some of that, you're going to have to go back to basics. And you have to accept that you're not going to have all the solutions. If you're going to use ham radio, I hear this all the time, that's good. I mean, it might work for a while until they clamp down on that. They will. You're going to have to use mail for some points. That's fine. And that'll work until it doesn't. And there's a person wrote me today. It's like, then if all these fail, we have to go to our bunkers anyway. And I'm like, yeah, probably. But I mean, you've got to think in terms of this, of protocols and how to work. And every technology that we have has been compromised in one way or another. I do believe there's a great piece. I will send it to you after the show, but it's a great piece that we listened to. I played in full on the show last night. It was a minister and prophetic voice who was not against AI and had this amazing conversation with ChatGPT and set up some rules so that it could get answers. And basically ChatGPT was able to pull out of ChatGPT the greater agenda, which is enslave people. It's bottom line. And if you're going to keep walking down what is easy, you're going to get ensnared. There's no way around this. The interesting thing is, in this, he did not ask it. It presented it when he said, how do you overcome? And his ChatGPT's response was, the only way you will defeat this is truth, knowledge, defiance, and the belief in Christ. Isn't that amazing? That came from ChatGPT. So it's I think that we're hearing a lot very clearly of how we live. And it's the choices that we make in this time. Stewardship and shepherding to me are, I would say, three words. Stewardship, conservation, stewardship, and shepherding are probably three words that need to be in our vernacular constantly and daily. Conservation is obviously being just wise in what we consume, limiting the amount of consumption, not going to waste. We talk about food issues. That I just did this I was just researching this. We waste 108 billion pounds of food in this nation every year. 60 million tons, or 60 tons, 60 million tons, 60 million tons. That's insane, man.
Yeah.
That's what we waste. And we have children in our country alone, not even to mention around the world, that are on food scarcity. And that value is in the billions of dollars of value of food that we're literally throwing away every year. That's the life that reflects to me. I look at a number of statistics on where's the heart of the nation, right? What shows the heart of the nation, and where are we? And so one of them I bring up all the time: 33 million images of child pornography, not just pornography. 33 million images of child pornography are consumed and downloaded in the U.S. every year. We add to that 86 or 87 million images of child abuse pornography, 60% of it which comes from filmed by biological fathers. This is a reflection of the moral heart of a nation. Then you take food, right? And then you take food and you're like, oh, okay, so now you're taking the gift of nurturing, of sustenance, and you're wasting as a nation 108 billion pounds. Like, okay, I mean, I don't know if you can say anything more to that. I mean, that's your true. If you're going to ask about, are we winning? I go, are we affecting those numbers? That's what I want to know. Because when those numbers start to really shift, then we're seeing a moral shift in the nation. And it's an accountability shift. I can't comprehend those things. I can, but when I say that, I sit back and go, well, what are we trying to accomplish here? But I think that when we get back to the principles of thinking through where things are likely going, and I don't think there's any question on where that train's going, if you're going to stay on that train. And unfortunately, when I say that for many, because there's been so much hope placed in Trump, he's in the conductor's seat of that train. A person who's probably the most neutral politically of anybody I know that speaks to hard political truth is Catherine Austin Fitts.
Yeah.
And her own position is that the bankers have decided Trump's their guy. That's all you need to know right there, right? So I guess one of the messages I just try to pound home, and I do it in many different ways, is stop worshiping politicians, put your focus on where it should be, which is God, and stay true to a course now of trying to seek a sovereign way of life. And that is going to take a lot of work. It doesn't come easy, but it's so rewarding. And when we start to realize where they're trying to push everybody, Palantir is another one. I mean, future crimes that they do, and the concept of AI that they're using and the projection of future crimes is far more than that, because it's also deals with geofencing people. It deals with social credit scores. It deals with literally limiting your physical movement. And so in a couple of these groups I'm in right now that are kind of reflective of the type of work I did in the latter years, like last years I was in the Department of Defense as a contracted element. And it's all looking at future technology stuff, which is what we did a lot of. And I look at all the future emerging technologies that are being shared, and there's a lot of them, and they're crazy and they're overwhelming, and there's no escape in this, and yet there is. But it's not that way. You can't beat tech with tech. You're not gonna have a bigger sword. You're not gonna have a bigger hammer. You're always gonna be outmatched, and you're always gonna be out-resourced by the people that are funding this. That's just a simple fact. Yeah, I've said this, and I ended up working along this line in my Department of Defense time with some of the transhumanist scientists. They're a piece of work, I'll tell you. But They had all this technology in 2014. They had achieved everything they needed for the transhumanist transition 2014. So I just need people to understand that this is not new. And the only barrier they had was, and it was in their own publications, was how do we get past the moral and ethical objection to what we want to do? Well, they've accomplished that. And they've accomplished that through the slow drip and the excitement for, these trinkets. Like, I want to play with AI online. Every time you do, you're feeding the beast. We're going to deal with a pandemic. We're going to get the shot in everybody because we're going to drive it by fear. It's going to be completely fear-based, and people will comply because they're too afraid, right? All of these things. And then you just watch the innovations. You just have to ask yourself, like, who's benefiting and why would I want to do that? Why would I want to have my dental floss have vaccines in it, which is the latest one?
Yes.
It's like, oh, that's awesome. That's wonderful. I can't wait to floss my teeth and get some mRNA while I'm doing it as well. It's just insane. So it just goes back to common sense. It doesn't take a lot. We look at so much of these things as it's always a do as thou will, and we don't look at it as the greater issue of the species. When does a cow ever ask for its calf to be modified to another sex, right? Or when does a cow seek to abort its baby? Let me tell you, these animals they're just natural mothers, whether it's a dog, a cow, a chicken, they're just natural mothers. It's instinctive. So we've kind of convinced ourselves that we're somehow out of the natural order of things, which is a lie. And yet we go along with this. And as we go along with this, we need to be asking, and they don't want you to be asking these questions because they want you focused on this next step, which is we're going to manage your life for you. That's why we talk about, these technologies of, we want to have a artificial womb that you can put in your, I can't even imagine this, artificial womb we can put in your front room and you can see your baby grow while you still go to your work, and don't worry about it. It's all going to be good. You can play some nice music and the dog will be there to bark at it or whatever. And better yet, you can get a Tesla robot and it'll clean the glass for the baby every day. Insane. And there's another one. I'm just hitting a few of these things. I'm going to bring it around here in just a second, but given this robot thing, and you just hear the conversations, and they're forcing narratives upon people. So they're forcing narratives that they want you to agree with. Everybody's going to want a robot. I don't want a robot.
No way.
The minute it does the download, you're going to have, The Shining happen in your home. And
Yeah.
Right. It's going to I know the kids. Sir, I realized the kids were bothering you. So sorry, but I haven't cleaned up the mess yet, but I took the axe to your wife and the children today because I want you to be happy. It's like, oh, great. Thanks. That's the insanity we're dealing with. But it also reflects on a moral issue for our nation. If you want a robot, you would own a slave. But the only reason you're willing to own a robot and not a slave is because there's an ethical conflict there. But if you want a robot, you would want a slave. So I think at this point in time, to kind of come around to what you were saying about preparations and what we're faced with, there is a huge change in our motivations in preparing, because the preparations are getting to a spiritual place of us growing together and understanding that there's a deeper purpose for living rather than just things. We're willing to get rid of things. We're willing to go backwards in a way, so to speak. I know it's not spiritually, but physically. We're willing to innovate. We're willing to take ourselves off the dependency of the convenient society. We're willing to say, here's a red line, even if I have to rummage for my food up in the woods. I'm willing to do that because there's a line that we will not cross. And I think if anything, the preparations of before, where it was a war that we were as if we were going to fight an enemy, bunker up, do our sniper hides, have our safe rooms, and we're going to fight back and lead the revolution. My sense of it now is, nah, we're going to let you just kind of your candle burn out, and we're going to be able to weather the storm, and we're going to do it in a wonderful way, because even the crazies that come, I believe now, even in the crazies that come, they will be transformed. So instead of your zombie horde model, you might have the random person out here trying to jump your fence and try to kill your cow, but It's not about shooting them. It's about engaging them and saying, what are you doing? And the difference being in that model, if I'm just giving a scenario, right? It's like, instead of you're on my land, you're getting my cow, I'm going to shoot you from my sniper height at 330 meters. I'm going to ride my ATV down and go, what are you doing? And you're hungry? Come up to my house. I'm going to feed you. That is, to me, is the big shift and where we need to be going in community, because we are all one big community. And it's that love that we have and respect that we have that should be awakening in everybody to start realizing that there's some real horror shows going on in this world right now. And you can't blindly be obedient to a terrorist state and we're one. You can't be blindly obedient to a terrorist state, because what you measure, how you measure one will be measured back on you. So let us steward well, let us shepherd well, and let us start doing the things that start building hope for a future and live into those places and stick the fear off to somewhere else. That's someone else's problem. Just like live simply so others will simply live.
I couldn't agree more. Actually, I think this is the right kind of crescendo of the conversation to conclude on, is that as much as we went through the dark journey of the, exploring these topics, I think it's not fear-based, but it comes back to us. I think all we have to do is just out-survive them, right? And opt out of their system. And the more you do, the more you realize that God gives you bounty, right? Through seed, through animals that keep reproducing for you. If you go back to that, then you win. So, Scott.
Go ahead. I mean, so what is wealth, right?
Yeah.
Is a man with a handful of seeds, or a man full of dollars? I'll take seeds any day.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. I'll bring up your website, bards.fm. This is, through Podbean. This is the I think you're like probably the number one podcast on Podbean. You're just rocking it on there. Highly recommend for people that aren't familiar with Scott and his work. All your stuff's free. Go to bards.fm. Listen. Right. As you mentioned, you put out, I think, 16 shows a week. So there's no shortage of content. You won't get bored. And any other kind of, closing thoughts that you have, Scott, as we're wrapping up here?
I just really want to speak to this. There's a lot of voices out here, and it's always a pleasure talking to you, because there's such a commonality in thought, and it's nice. It's refreshing. You have a tremendous amount of real experience. I think that this is something that I would just challenge people to look at where you spend your time. It's having content just to talk about stuff or do interviews or whatever is one thing. But when you find people that are living what they're saying, you're one. You're doing the hard work. You're digging the fence posts. You're raising the animals. You're growing the food. Even if that doesn't reflect in every show, it's that core value that starts to change you. And so the litmus test for me really is, for a lot of people, and there's some good voices out there, but I can't stay with a lot of them, because at the end of the day, I get what you're saying, but your empire may be built because you've got a lot of money and you don't have to worry about these things, or we're just kind of living in that bubble, like things are going to move on and be okay, and you're still going to be able to buy your food at Whole Foods or Sprouts or whatever. I don't know why I'm beating on those lately, but I am. But anyway, that's just my target. But my point is that you got to get your hands dirty, and when you're out here looking for experience, there's a lot of good voices out here that are talking very similar ways. Align with those, because that's also part of your community. It's a knowledge base, and you're one. And I really respect what you're doing immensely, and I'm very honored to be here today and just share that, because and I'm just speaking from a professional point of view to another professional. I think you would agree. There are good voices out there, but there are not a ton of voices out there that are literally rolling up their sleeves and digging in. And that's what we need right now. We need more people walking it out, not just talking of the problems, but talking solutions. I don't have all the solutions. I don't even say I do, but I know that we try come up with some. If there's one goal I have in every show, whether it's through prayer or whether it's just through a simple action item, never leave people hanging without some action they can do that'll bring a bit of hope. Because hope lights the world. And when you have hope, you can have the darkest night and you'll survive.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Well, Scott, thank you again for your time. It's such a pleasure. And I think I'm coming on your show in the next week or two as well. So I'm really excited for that.
I'm super excited about this. We're going to have a great conversation there too. So it's
perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you again, Scott, so much. I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Scott Kesterson as much as I did. He's, again, one of my favorite people to listen to. I think he's got one of the best shows out there because he's coming to the stage with wisdom. He's a former, soldier. He's been on the ground. He knows what that's like. He's been in operations for, a lot of, serious kind of life and death situations, but he also has this deep spiritual wisdom that comes into what he talks about. And he's someone that is doing it in his real life. He's not someone that is just, showing up and talking on TV. I mean, he's out there, tending to his cattle, building community and so much more. And I have a lot of respect for that. But as you probably saw on this show or listened to, we talked about some different projects, and I talked about something that we're doing. So one of our big initiatives that we're shifting a lot of our focus on is building a community. And the idea is to build an online community that then can lead to offline communities, right? So you can meet people, you can sync up with people that, say you're looking for someone that is an expert on solar. You can find that person and get help from that person. But instead of us going through this process of building this big community, inviting you into it, we're doing it the reverse, actually. So from the ground up, I want you to help us build the community. And so what we're doing is we are taking in 75 community builders, right? So the community, once it goes up there, it'll probably be some form of paid community. I think we're going to pay what you want. So if you can only do $1 a month, great, you'll get access. But what we want to do though is we want to invite people that are very passionate about preparedness, very passionate about survival and building community, people that have knowledge, whether it's about medical knowledge or animal husbandry or gardening or food preparation or security. We want to bring these people in. We want to bring you in to help start building this community. And so what we're doing is that we're opening the window at the very beginning. We're going to take 75 people, so 75 of you that are passionate about doing this. I'm going to give you lifetime access to the community for free. But what we want though is we want you to help us to build this community. And there's a lot more details that we'll share with you as we're moving along. But if this is something that you're interested in, if it's something that you feel a calling to, that you want to help kind of start building a community and help bring people together, I would love to have you. And so what we're doing, we're going to have a form set up so people they can apply, so you can kind of ask some questions. We don't have that quite ready yet, but if you're interested and you want to be put onto a list of people for the early invite to potentially become one of our community builders, just send us an email. So this email, hello@maninamerica.com. So the email is just hello@maninamerica.com. In the subject line, just write community. Okay. And then in there, just give a brief introduction to yourself. But most importantly, I have your email. So as soon as we have our initial survey where you can apply to be a community builder, we'll email you and most likely will be accepted, though it depends on how many people come in, because again, we're limiting it to 75 people for the community builder to help us really get this community off the ground. It's going to be very intimate. So the community builders, I'll probably be doing weekly calls with you on just, trying to get to know like what you're seeing and what you think is going to be best and how we can most effectively build this together. So if you're interested in being part of that, and you want to join, just start by shooting us an email, hello@maninamerica.com, and just write community in the subject line with a brief introduction of yourself, and I'll put you on that list so that you can be one of the early applicants to become a community builder. So again, hello@maninamerica, community as a subject line. I hope to hear from you because I'm so excited about this. I feel like in a lot of ways that everything we've done with Man in America is leading us into this one direction as we're building something. We're building, in a lot of ways, our own ark, right? Similar to the book, Prep Like Noah, that's what we're doing. We're building an ark that's going to allow us to bridge together and to come together and use our skills and everything, first online, but then doing offline. So we'll start doing events and meetups and all that kind of stuff. So again, if you want to be part of this, email hello@maninamerica.com, subject line community. I look forward to hearing from you.